Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm thrilled to be hosting this writer-to-writer conversation on craft and featured reading series, which pairs writers together to read from their work and to discuss aspects of being a working writer. Our two poets tonight are Maudelle Driskell and Abigail Wender. Thank you both for being here tonight. Maudelle, I yield the metaphorical stage to you.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks again to the Vermont Studio Center. My name is Maudelle Driskell, and it's really wonderful to be with you tonight. And I saw Marie Pavlicek-Worley. She's somewhere here. I want to give Marie a shout out because she provided me this amazing work of her fine art for the cover of my book. It's really fantastic. This reading is wonderful because I'm among friends and colleagues that are part of my, I hope, forever literary community. And it's really great to share the conversation. I'll be reading some new poems and old poems and a few translations. Since Abby is a translator, I want to read one or two of my small efforts. So with that said, I suppose we can just get started. I'm going to start with a translation of a poem by Lorca, Song of the Barren Orange Tree. Woodcutter, cut my shadow from me. Free me from the torment of seeing myself without fruit. Why was I born among mirrors? The day walks in circles around me, and the night copies me in all its stars. I want to live without seeing myself. And I will dream that ants and thistle burrs are my leaves and my birds. Woodcutter, cut my shadow from me and free me from the torment of seeing myself without fruit. This poem has really spoke to me, and although there are wonderful translations out there, I wanted to give it a stab. To go forth as a luminous being. This starts out with a quote from Yoda from The Empire Strikes Back. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. Yoda, The Empire Strikes Back. The Jedi nesting dolls are smooth and fit together perfectly. Hollows filled with hollows, rounds filled with rounds, impossibly long necks, supraorbital ridges like Anaheim chilies, flanges with all the fixins smoothed, represented two-dimensionally in shiny enamel. From Yoda, the eyes know what the hands do not. Round to round, head to head, tail to tail in a concentric sequence, a gyre of gimbaled supergalactic superphilosopher pocket-sized nesting ninjas. The smallest is largest, a stretched Yoda containing Obi-Wan, Fister, and Skywalker. They all fit in my pocket, and I can look inside. Much to learn you still have, my old Padawan. This is just the beginning. I can look inside and find nothing there, simply a set of hollows filled with a diminished self, orbits of belly and back that rattle together when shaken, hungry and hollow, within and within and within, so close but so lonely, lonely as the fingers of the right hand for the right elbow, lonely as the sun for its own light, lonely as being that thing, and longing for that same thing. To suffocate gladly in the air. One parasite that lives in birds of prey begins in fish. It makes them lighter than their brethren, more visible, and controls their brains, gives pleasure and desire to surface, to flaunt themselves, to rise to that moment of claws, of puncture and suffocation. And I believe these worms are merciful. The water surface breaks into diamonds. The fish lifts toward the sun into a joy, wind on its scales, soaring, soaring. Hope everybody can hear me okay. How's my volume, Sarah? Perfect. The naming of the body. I was a good child. I waited, and I listened, and I learned about the nature of things. The way the male box turtle's plastrum is cupped, the fork in the shell above its thicker tail. Modifications so he could fit, so he could mate without rocking away. I thought there'd be a change. At some point, I would change and grow to be a man, to take my place with a wife. When I asked my mother at 5 what my name would be, when I would be changed, she cried. And now I know I will die in this body. For the boy I never was. The men lit the fires in the corners of the field. When Rob was old enough, they gave him a can and a torch and set him to burning. It starts like this: the division, labor, knowledge, scars and calluses, the post between grandfather and father, beers and fire, suit-gilded chemicals, faces alchemic in red light. But Rob dangled his legs from the tailgate, holding an old Milwaukee he would not drink. Nor, when he was done, would he walk the field, passing animals as black as the ground, twisted among the burnt stubble, as in the stories he heard them tell, stories of war. Animals thin enough won't burn. Flames starve on their bodies. Rob makes his life and family with other men. They have licenses to all the secrets. Now, only the women are left to burn the fields. And we don't know why the coyotes have come back. Our dogs take up with them and hunt, mate, probably die. The old yellow bitch stares at the woods, listening to the pack, to the barks, to the howls. She trembles and strains, pacing the edge of the cleared land, but she won't go to them. We are the ones who feed her. This is a fairly new work. It's called End of Day, and it's the only thing you need to know is that there are 2 snakes in it. One is a water moccasin, which is a venomous snake from the family Agistrodon, and its cousin snake is the copperhead, same family, beautiful and deadly, that lives in the woods. End of day. End of day. Bird song overtaken by insects, the insistence of crickets, and a slight lessening of the heat. My mother, I thought, was watching the sunset at the barn. Instead, she bent at the waist. She alternates between misting a copperhead with olive oil and pumping the sprayer, adding pressure. The head and first few inches of the snake's body are stuck on a glue board she put out to catch mice. All that sinuous flexibility useless as she lifts with grilled tongs and its weight pulls against the glue. The snake's pupil is not a slit. It is almost round, a glimmer of rust at the edge, a flash of hazel. We are close now, that hazel eye and I. The snake yawned or lifted its head, yawing the top half. No fangs showing, but there they are, sleeved in smooth, pink, soft-looking flesh. My mother shook, gently, once, twice, and it fell. And it sounded like anything else falling. Keeled belly up, stunned, the snake lay still. The copperhead filled the air with the smell of cucumbers. This family holds the copperhead, russet, chestnut, shining, and marked for hiding in leaf, fall, and the cottonmouth, camouflaged for dark water and black mud. Last week, Mom killed the entire crop of heirloom tomatoes we babied from seeds. She used an oscillating fan to harden them for the field. The seedlings moved in and out of the shade and accustomed them to the South Georgia sun. She mowed them down on the tractor in pursuit of a snake that may or may not have been a cottonmouth. Shreds of snake and tomato sprayed across the yard. My mother prizes beauty. I want to read just a little bit from a sequence of 14 poems. Many of these I worked on with Abby and some with Sarah. The 14 poems were written during a time that I waited for a diagnosis from an illness. And they originally were a crown of sonnets that I pulled apart. I hope that they stand on their own. They each have titles. And I will begin with the number of the poem in the sequence and the title. 14 days. Number 1, not. When I raised my right arm, tension. Something connected where it should not be. Gum between sole and sidewalk. It does not ease with stretches. When I probe with my fingers and find the node, it sounds an internal bass note. I hear it, and the house hums in the background, and the neighbor is blowing leaves in the yard, and the clink of the poorly loaded dishwasher stutters before finding its cadence once more. 2, wish. And so the little wooden dog came to life. It chased sticks through the verge, quick and smooth on its wooden wheels. But when the boy pulled it home with a knotted cotton string, the little wooden dog would not eat. It would not eat. It only rolled around and around the braided oval rug with 2 wheels on the rug and 2 wheels on the tile. Soon the wheels began to squeak, and the wood turned rough and gray, and the little wooden dog trembled as if rolling through the tumult of a great storm. So the boy returned to his knot of wishes and rubbed the smooth head until it was warm. He wanted to fix this, to clarify his wish and bring contentment to the dog. But the little wooden dog, worried the braided wool once more, tipped over, rattled, and was still. Flaws of the giant clam, 9. The clam is large enough to hold me like a lover. It's bright blue inside, the color of its shell, sand. Looking down at it is like looking through a torn curtain into the sky. The shell stays open unless the light's blocked. A fish can eat it alive as long as no shadows are cast on its heart. Closet monster, 10. The closet monster came first to the hospital. I fell asleep during the end of the 6th happiness. When I woke, someone had turned off the lights, and it was easing its way out into the room. It was walnut-headed and clicking and swimming free in the shadows. The clicks I can only imagine are chitinous jaws slick as hard candy. It's always hungry. It's impatient. It keens and rocks when others approach. It should disappear when the lights are turned on, but it doesn't. It becomes a wasteful thing of strings and sticks, a secret, a fixture. This poem, the San Blas Archipelago, is in Panama, and it's a wonderful thousands of islands that are still peopled with indigenous First Nations folks. And the Kestel is just a sailing boat. Number 12, the light the eyes make. On my father's sailboat, in the San Blas archipelago, caught between the black bowl of a clouded sky, I sleep on a hammock, suspended between the forestay and mast. If I think slow enough or large enough, I can track the Kestel's movement on the anchor, the swaying that will put her bow to the wind. If I try to see, try to resolve any object in the darkness, my eyes hurt as if I've been reading for hours. My mind is all alone in the dark. This is where the werewolf comes from. Trickster gods, tumors, betrayals, all the rock-breast leviathans I can raise. I can see my monster crouched above me. Sea wind blowing its slaver into silver loops, but I can't see the deck or the cleat with its troubled figure 8. Then, coming toward me, in the sea, a dotted line of light. Light like a burning yak butter candle, the skittery light of animal fat on fire in a cave. Over instant coffee, in broken Spanish, I asked the mate, it's either a squid or the light your eyes make. Thank you again to the Vermont Studio Center and my fellow wonderful poets. Luna moths. Aaron loves these fragile creatures, bruising themselves on our bay window. I leave the lamp on near the window to draw them, to please her, to savor the guilt of having entranced them, these mouthless imagos that live only long enough after emergence to mate. They fling themselves over and over into the glass, and she watches. We are starving, these moths and I, pummeled with need, unable to escape the promise of the light. We butt the glass over and over. Here is where this poem should turn toward love. But this isn't about love. This is a trick of biology, of phantom hormones. When she told me she was ovulating, I drove home to bang myself against her, obeying the imperatives, the raging and the clanging echoes of work that I can never do. How long do they live like this, mouthless and hungry? How long to starve? And everything was there to build me right. Everything was there to build me right. Everything was right there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jill. If anyone wants to unmute and give a round of applause, feel free to do so.
Beautiful.
And Abby, the floor is yours.
Okay. That was great. Maudelle, listening to you read those poems, some of which I know quite well. And thank you, Sarah, for having me. And I can't think of someone I would rather be reading with, representing Vermont. Maudelle and I were in our thesis workshop together. So those 14 days really resonates with me for so many reasons. So I'm happy to be here to read from my book. I'll start with a poem. Maudelle and I spoke a little bit before a couple of days ago, and one of the things that she mentioned was how I use form, which is not, I often use it at some point and then get rid of it. So I thought I would start with this poem, which is in a form. It's pretty close to a form, pretty much all the way through until the end when it breaks down. And it's a pantoum, which you'll recognize. And it's called First Snow. It's a poem in retrospect to the central, that's sort of looking in retrospect to the central core story of this book, which is the life and death of one of my brothers, but it will come up. So this is called First Snow. If she were alive, I'd telephone. She at her window, I at mine. As snow falls aslant. She at her window, headlights sweeping out the old year as snow falls aslant. Into my hands rushes her voice. Again, as headlights sweep out the old year, I hear her, come right now. Into my hands rushes her voice the night he died. There was an ice storm. I hear her, come now. Nothing could be done. I waited the night my brother died. Ice storm. Couldn't survive. Could we be done? Wait. At dawn, I drove to the city he couldn't survive and found her shaken, aghast. Dawn, I drove to the city. She was alone at last. Shaken, aghast. She was at last mine. She was alone, a diffused mine. At last she was mine, an excavated mine. If she were alive today, I'd call. I'm going to turn to the book, the poems that are a series in here called Auguries, which at one time was the whole book. This book went through so many different stages, and Maudelle saw a number of them. So I'll read a few from the series called Auguries. Oh, my brother, no more your orphan mouth. Why can't I kneel and pray? I let myself out the window, take the fire escape. The days pant, the days hang. He vanishes like water through my fingers, but he wasn't made of water or light. Though he seemed lucent, tender after the evening bath, the child who wrapped a towel turban style around his head, joked, I'm delightful to be with. He was right about the war, and I was a pedantic twerp. He ate mayonnaise sandwiches, played trumpet, then flute, disappeared into the dog's luxuriant fur, whip and speed of ocean surf, devoured our mother's ice cream wafer cake, licking the whisk she'd hand him. The poet Horace told his friend not to weep. It's all superfluous. I won't be there. This is a reliquary to hold my brother's gifts, his sad kindness. What to say to those who remember him? I wait to hear him praised. What led him to that outermost gate? Our absent father, our violent eldest brother? One blames the mother, at least that's what ours thought. Don't wear that, no one will ever love you, you look like trash. Mother, who brought the grown child home, stayed awake with him strung out, shallow-breathed, who stored his methadone on her refrigerator shelf. Just one more from this. Our family is divided, descended from gray wolves. Our affectionate dog barks, guards the domus. Wide-mouthed mother packs the linen drapes, takes my younger brother and me. Far-sighted father takes the ivory chest and older boys. The dog of the era is left behind, to shepherd, dig the hole by the brook, to pace, retreat, to wail. Dying, my mother asks, What madness was I thinking to forget that dog? Via negativa. This time I won't think the sky is falling while riding the bus to Rikers Island. In the prison waiting room, no guard will touch my shoulder, say, "Why so scared?" This time I won't be afraid, won't flinch, won't shudder. Cameras won't seek us from every corner, and he won't ask if I have it, and I won't have it. Pressed into my sneaker, dope, like me, closed in a yellow balloon. I want to read this poem that I wrote a first draft of, which was thanks to Maudelle. She invited me and a number of other people to do translations, I think, from German poems and to perform with, I think it was the Northern, do you remember, Del, what it was? It was a symphony from the North Mountain Country Symphony. Anyway.
The North Country Chamber Players. They come up in the summer from Boston. They're wonderful.
They were wonderful. And it was a wonderful experience to read with a bunch of musicians. And I wrote a translation of The Trout, which was Schubert, but I can't find it. So I'm just going to read the poem that came later, which is called After Goethe's Erl King. And the Erl King myth, it's sort of a story, is about an elf king who lives in the forest, and he needs children and he steals them. So this is what came of that initial poem. After Goethe's Erl King. He was a boy who couldn't keep from falling. A ping in a bucket, then the bucket overflowed. In prison, he washed in a bucket, paid for his misconduct. He was a bucket with a hole that couldn't be patched. Grain, water, wisdom slid through that crack. He never said he was scared, caught red-handed with his desire. Somehow I'll forget how he slips from his father's arms into fire. This poem is set in Sri Lanka, where my husband was born, and of course we spent a lot of years there, going back and forth. It's called A Blessing. Already the air had begun to fry, yet it was just cool enough for us to jog the few blocks to Vihara Mahadevi Park, where your father's heart failed. I met the gaze of the street sweeper, staring at your bare legs, my naked arms. His spit landed close. A new 12-foot corrugated fence hid the squatters from our sight, though nothing can hide my pale skin or the smell of plastic burning from copper wire, which isn't the only smell of desperation. Do you remember standing by the bench, trees filled with sleeping bats? Buddha watched behind his plaster lids, those who wash and drink in these fountains, and those who stand motionless, wrapped in white. He knows the spot where your father fell, all equal in the Buddha's blessings. May he find nirvana. May we find nirvana. But I get ahead of myself. I'll read this. I wasn't going to read this, but I think I will. This is a poem called The Dark Sky, and it is in conversation with the events of 9/11. It was written to a friend of mine who did an art installation called Guernica, in which, for the first time, she went to Spain. She was right in one of the buildings, not the Twin Towers, but next door to the buildings where the plane came in, and she ended up doing a long project in which she went to Spain and interviewed the survivors of Guernica, the few remaining survivors of Guernica. And believe it or not, they had never been interviewed before. And they actually said to her something like, "We've been waiting for you." So her project talked about memory, and it spurred this on. It's called The Dark Sky. The explosions we heard that day are silent in outer space. The sky has no memory of numbers, nor of phone numbers, dog tags, zip codes, not the dimmest memory. With no end to the stars, it's impossible to compare the universe to ourselves. So let's avoid comparisons altogether, the way a physician avoids a final diagnosis. Ancient Egyptians believed the heart stored memory. They mummified it too inside the body, then buried everything along with cat, dice, and spinning tops, pastimes, and memory bundled together in hemp. This hemp pallet you and I lie on is made of longing. How we love to yearn. And what's love hurrying us to? A house of clouds? I guess we evaporate. We fear it. It's the knife we dare not touch. The knife that pierces fog, though I can't say why. I'll read two more. Since I stopped teaching, at least teaching continually, I've become a translator. And this is a poem that I wrote, which is a little bit of an ode to translation in some ways. It's about well, you can find it in my book, but it's about a translator, and I quote some words of hers, but it's pretty obvious. Translation. In English, we come to grief and drive drunk over a cliff, or it befalls us, a stroke or lightning, and we grieve. A famous translator said to her students, "Tend the fire." Every word born with its sphere of heat. "Look up from your pages," was another phrase she'd say, both at once, like riding a bike with no hands. At her desk, the translator wrapped a dictionary absently, searching for a pattern as she mourned her son's accidental death, an absurd event. The heat searches for us. Last night, every leaf blew off the linden tree. This morning, it's filled with ravens, flapping their jewel black wings, lifting off. And I will end with another poem. Thank you for all for coming and listening. This poem is called X Chromosome. And it's a braided poem. I started with talking a little bit about repetition, which this poem repeats a lot, but it looks like this, since there are a lot of poets here. And it was written thinking about that braid, actually, because, of course, the X chromosome is a braid. Dear X chromosome, I have the sense we are alone. Found in ordinary cells, the extra X makes the woman, makes heart, breast, womb. Why there's all this space inside me, I don't know. Kidney, pancreas, stomach, spleen. Our 100,000 miles of veins, another universe unknown. It takes 3 days to reach our moon. Despite knowing we may be alone, my arms and legs outstretch, I keep trying to solve for X. Ancient mothers live inside this X. With all this space inside me, X chromosome, mothership, mitochondria, live inside this X. Everything beautiful is far away and unknown. I own the ancient mother X. The message from my deep space repeats inside this rocket ship. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Everyone's invited to unmute and give a round of applause.
Thank you. Nice to see some of your faces, Karen.
Yeah, feel free if you want. You can turn on your video if you'd like.
Hey, Katie.
Hey, Abby. Hey, Del. Hey, Sarah. This was wonderful.
Thank you. So fun.
Hi, Marie. Nice to see you.
Hey.
Hey, Maudelle.
Wish we were all in a room together.
I know, me too. What a wonderful reading. It's so good to hear, like, you both possess your voices in a way that I admire. I mean, it just comes through. Possess the poems and inhabit with your voices.
Oh, thank you.
Work. Yeah.
Thank you, Marie.
Well, I tell you, I got my book out because if Abby hadn't read translation, I was jumping on that opportunity to read it myself. I thought people might mistake it for my work if they saw me reading it on the internet.
Oh, go ahead.
So wonderful.
Are there any questions for our poets tonight, or anything you want to?
Could you both talk a little bit just about how your friendship, your relationship as working poets has sustained you through these last years? And when I say that, I would say this last decade, maybe. Could you just speak to that a bit?
Of course, Abby.
I'd be happy to. I mean, I think both of us could speak to that. I think the friendship of poets and fiction writers, but the deep friendship I have had and the generosity of poets has sustained me in a way I would never have imagined. They kept me writing when I think being a poet or any writer, any serious writer, you can get absolutely nothing from the universe, which isn't why you write, but it can feel very hollow because, of course, we all write to communicate something inside us that we're not finding another way to express or to connect with. So, or at least I do. So just my friends that I was lucky to make through poetry, through teaching and studying. And obviously, I read those couple of poems that, or talked about those poems that I wrote with Maudelle, and there were many others that she helped me with, have been there to help me reflect and quite simply, in some ways, just to keep going, Marie, just to keep thinking about it and to keep digging in the craft. Yeah. Now, you might have a different idea, Maudelle, but I think
I've got loads of different ideas, Abigail Wender. But I do want to say it's quite strange and wonderful that you asked that, Marie. It's wonderful to see you. Because Abby and I were talking about what do we think might be unique about us that has to do with craft and might be helpful. And one of the things that I thought first was that these friendships. We look back and we think about, like, if you think about any of the movements that we study in whatever book of literature about whatever, choose any group of poets. At that time, they were just friends in the way that we're friends, excited about writing and sharing the work with contemporaries. And what that gives you is a perspective on your work and what's going on. If we begin to think that poetry inhabits the past, or that it's handed down to us like the canon, as opposed to it being the truest humanist form of communication, the voices of our truth and imagination and culture, wherever you're coming from, whatever your heritage is, and cutting that off from our lives, then I feel that's a great mistake. The community of writers that are around us, whether it's the Frost Place, the friends that I made at Warren Wilson, the friends that I might make tonight after this reading. Sarah and I met and were colleagues, and we worked on so many poems. We had brown bag lunches and worked on poems together. Abby and Marie and Katie, just many of us work in different ways. Just to feel it as an apprenticeship where you continue writing and learning from others through your entire life. And to realize that publication is sort of the end of the process. And we're reading things that we wrote years ago, even if they're some of our newest poems, and that our friends are sparked and involved in whatever craft we're learning about, whatever history or culture. So for me, it keeps it relevant and keeps it connected to my past and literature.
I love what you just said about the connection to the current moment, to wherever you are as a person experiencing whatever you experience. I think that is really a very key point, and why you want to share your writing with anybody.
And everyone has this wonderful, unique voice. I mean, Abby and I, even though I'm sure that you would agree, and I kind of hesitate to see what the auto translators said I said. There's no telling. But we feel that our poems speak to each other, and our voices are so different. It's because we're sort of in community with each other. And being in community brings in different voices and perspectives from all your friends. You can really learn from that and grow and expand. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, it does. And I could hear that connection. I could hear that kind of conversation, like in the poems between the two of you. It wasn't like real obvious or intentional, but I could hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's really a great thing. If you're looking for a group of writers, or you don't have a peer-to-peer exchange or whatever, I think it would be a really wonderful model to be able to help facilitate it. And one of the ways that things like The Grind, which is run by Ross White from Bull City Press, allow you to just read others' writing every day, so you don't have to be isolated. And then there's the luxury of maybe getting together once a year and having a good chat and going away to a cabin, or just having everybody come and squat in your living room. You know, there's all of those different possibilities. Anybody that wants to come squat in my living room, just hit me up and chat.
Any other questions? Anybody else? Any other thoughts?
If I'm supposed to be reading chat, I have to put my glasses on.
I was wondering if you could speak to assembling your manuscripts and sequencing, and how your different projects took different amounts of lengths of time, as well as conceptually putting them together. Yeah. It's the stage I'm in right now, so I'm interested
In
in
2
your
minutes or less.
I'm interested in both of your processes, and I know that every every book has a different story. So I'm not sure if that's interesting to talk about. And at what point did you bring in someone else to look at your manuscripts to assist and help you see it a different way?
Abby, would you like to take it first, or?
Oh, you go first,
Okay.
since yours came out before mine.
Yeah, mine's almost like carved in stone now. But it kind of gives you an idea about how long the first book, I think, is very different. Excuse me, because you're constructing a book of poems that you may or may not have written over a long period of time. And often there are groupings that occur there naturally because of your voice or sort of your artistic interest, and you can assemble it that way. I spoke with Ellen Bryant Voigt, who I consider her books to be a master. And if I had like wishes from a genie, I would have her look at all my books and assemble them, but I don't. So what I do is I take her books and deconstruct them and think about the way they would go back together. And what Ellen told me that she does is she puts them on an ironing board and just lets them sit there and reads them and then she assembles it in that way. With my book, because I had that long sequence, which is almost a mini chapbook length at the end there, I knew that I would have to have at least 2 sections. And then as I began putting the poems together, and in my thesis workshop with Abby, a great many of these poems were there. I hung them up on a piece of clothesline and moved them around and sort of saw how they spoke to each other. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I'm afraid of permanence, especially when I'm making these kind of edits. So if I actually had them on the computer and I was moving them here or there, I felt much freer to move them on the clothesline. And finally, when I had what I felt like was sort of an order, and I felt like there were small narrative arcs within each section, then I was lucky enough to have some friends that looked at them for me. And many of the poems got left out and the sections of the book changed. The ones that I'm working on now, I have 2 books in the hopper, and they're a lot different and a lot easier because they're not my first book. And they're written more contemporarily. Some of the poems in my first book were written when I was an undergraduate. So it's a long time,
Yeah.
So this, I have a feeling this will be a totally different experience.
How about you, Abby? Like, as far as your next book, like, are you working toward that now?
I hope it doesn't take as long as this book, Marie. This book I had this reliquary was called Herculaneum. It was called The Other Branch. It was called Auguries. So it went through many, many changes. And it is, I would say my experience of it is kind of similar to Dell's in that some of these poems were written 10 years ago. So it really was difficult to find what drew them together. I think finally, I just want to say that about this book, what finally helped me put it together, and I did, Sarah, to answer your question, I think Patrick Donnelly read an early draft of this, basically said, this is a mess. So you have to be very willing to hear what you hear, and I think, although it's hard sometimes to hear what you're asking for, I think it was really good advice. Finally, how it's come together, Marie, is the one poem talks to the other in terms more of emotional mood. And I put a lot of little tiny poems that hold it together. So there are all these reading this and reading that, and after this and after that were in my notebooks that kind of helped join these very disparate aspects of my life, so that it's not just a book about my older brother's heroin addiction from a very young age and going to jail. It turns out that didn't sustain a whole book. but there are many poems, but then how to put the other poems in without sort of losing some sort of emotional connection. I think that's why it took quite as long as it took. I hope so.
And Martha Rhodes, who I know is Abby's publisher, and she's one of my great teachers and mentors, has told me that the perfect world, people take a book and they read it from cover to cover, and that the book in that way performs in a great many different ways. And so when I got that advice from her, I really began thinking about it. However, she also said that that is not the case most of the time. So
right. And most of the time I don't do it. I do more now than I used to, but I usually actually now sit down and read a whole book through, unless it's a real thick thing, then it's just too much. But I hope with the poems that I've been writing during this, well, first of all, I did a translation during the last year, so I focused a lot in the last 4 years on that. But the poems that I'm writing are quite different, and I hope I don't even know if they'll hang together yet. I'm just on first drafts of everything. So I haven't really revised. They're all first drafts. So much has happened in the last 2 years that I'm thinking about and writing about. I don't know what will stay and what will go. So.
Here I see you have all kinds of things taped to your wall. Is that your scheduling that I know that you do, or are those drafts of poems?
Oh, that's versions of my manuscript.
There we go.
Good. There you go.
Take the camera over there. Let's get a preview of that thing.
No. There was a comment from a question. Jen says, hi and good morning from the Philippines. As a young and aspiring poet, this session was beyond inspiring and less isolating. Thank you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's so nice. And Jen asks, is there any advice they could share for young poets like me who are often struggling to find a literary community and finding their voice and style?
Well, I think if I could just interject something first, if that's okay, Abby.
Go ahead.
Jen, we have some wonderful friends, and that are from the Philippines who have a wonderful community. Now, that's just something that I noticed that you're from the Philippines, and they're very interested in do some anthologies. But I suggest that you contact Angela Narciso Torres on Facebook. She's a wonderful poet, and she's a great giver back to community. And you can certainly contact me. Exactly, Angela. Oh, thank you, Sarah. And she's just released another book. She's also a colleague and in our literary community. So, and also if you, of course, if you email me, I'll be glad to try to help you out too. The Frost Place, even though we don't have official writing communities, what I think we have is that we bring poets together, and then from there relationships can find out. And I bet the Vermont Studio Center, there are many different places that you can go, either virtually or in real life, to meet other writers and just kind of talk and convene. But maybe reach out, and please tell Angela that I send you with my regards.
Here. I agree. I think just reach out to different people and places, and I don't know what's in the Philippines, but Angela might actually be a good connection that way. She may, I think, yeah.
And I highly recommend her books.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure, it's a pleasure.
Yeah,
Thanks for
and
coming.
yes, no worries. And I'm so sorry. I couldn't open my video camera, and my dad is still trying to mop the floors. It's a little bit noisy here.
That's okay.
Nonetheless, this was really inspiring. And yeah, I think I've been struggling really to find a literary community here in the Philippines. And thank you so much for sharing a few connections where I could, touch base.
Yeah, well, I hope I hope it works out for you. One of the great things about what's happening now, and one of the few benefits that I can feel from being isolated during COVID, is the strengthening of online relationships and new online venues that have opened up where we can have community in that way. So you can find community online as well, which is not quite as convenient as walking to a coffee house. But I live way up in the woods in New Hampshire. There's not, Sarah is the closest one to me, and she's way the heck away. Or so she says, because she doesn't come over very much. But but it's just as easy to have a community online and to swap poems and share them.
I'm thinking also the grind might be something. So I'm going to ask Sarah if she could put that in the chat.
Yeah, the grind is a wonderful
I don't have it, but
community started by Ross White and Matthew Olsman. And Ross also runs Bull City Press and is a partner here at the Frost Place. But what they do is you commit to writing, whatever your genre is, one new piece every day for a full month. And you have small groups within them that you send the poems to. Ashley's telling on herself. I've been working on my piece, she says. So what it does is it motivates you to write. And even though you don't respond to other people's writing, being able to take a look at these sort of unsolicited snippets from other writers, I found it incredibly inspiring, and it relieved isolation.
yeah.
You want to share your grind piece, Ashley?
Yeah, Ashley.
Come on, put it up there.
It's nothing like writing a poem a day to make you mad as a hatter.
That's true. I just came back from the Connecticut Lakes District, I was 5 miles from the
There she is.
Canadian border. There you go. Hi, Ashley.
Hey, Ashley.
Canadian border. And on the way back, there was a porta potty that was turned over. There was all kinds of stuff by the road, and a person with their head like this. If anybody's missing something to write about today.
So Ashley, are you going to share your
Well, I've been working on something I call my Death 100. I've been trying to write 100 word pieces about things that circle around death. And I'm only 25 or so words in. Let's see if it'll ping. This is what I have for today so far. Did it post?
Not yet. I don't see it yet anyway.
You can read it.
Just
If you
read
want
it.
to.
Just read it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they're sort of they're kind of a mixed genre kind of thing. They're not really prose poems, but they're not really lyric essays. So all I have so far for today is I sang sweetheart murder ballads to my babies instead of lullabies, mostly Tom Dooley for its oohs and long e's and i's for its being a North Carolina story. That's as far as I've gotten.
Nice and swampy.
Swampy.
All
Very
right.
nice.
Yeah.
So the grind is a great thing, and I'm really pleased to hear, Ashley, not only your accent, which I am longing to hear, but also the wonderful sonics in that piece. It sounds great.
Well, thank you. Are there any last minute questions else? I think that there are a bunch of, Jen said that she captured a bunch of links. Please purchase our poets' books. I will drop in the links again.
I've been reading Abby's book every day, and that's not since I got it. And there are some poems that I see something else in every day. So if you have a chance and you want to get a book, I would love for you to have mine.
Which I blurbed Maudelle's book, so I definitely think you should read that book at least 3 or 4 times. It's a beautiful book.
Her book is amazing, and I'm so proud to read with her. And thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Let me know if you need me to send you some 550 paracord. You name the color, I'll send it over for you to clothespin your manuscript too.
No, I'm just gonna bring myself and my dog over so my dog can terrorize your dog.
That's good. I would love that.
Yeah.
I'd love that. My dog needs terrorizing.
Yeah. Well, it's not a threat, it's an actuality. So
Okay, good. That's what I'm telling you guys. Frost Place, you guys come on up.
May I have,
Thank you.
may I ask a question?
Yeah.
Last minute question. Good evening. Thank you for the reading and sharing all this information. I'm curious because you have read, both of you have read translations. And I was just wondering, what is your relationship with other languages and your poetry?
Well, Abby actually speaks other languages very well. And so my relationship with other languages, typically tripping over my tongue, that one of the poems in my book is about my relationship with Spanish, which I love as a language. And it was a kind of an eye-opening thing. I speak Spanish poorly now, but at one time I was fluent and my accent was incredibly good, but I didn't speak it so well. So people thought that I might be a little touched or a little special in some way when I spoke with native speakers because of the mistakes that I made. And so my relationship with Spanish is not really fraught, but I love it so much and I can read it. Abby, however,
No, my German is I mean, my German is not fluent. I can, I speak at the level of a 5-year-old, making a lot of mistakes, but you don't need to be incredibly fluent to translate. What you need to do, what you need really is the patience to look at a lot of dictionaries, to love words, to really love the English language or whatever language you're moving from one into the other, and to love thinking about language because it's all about choices and carefully trying to hear the tone of this, and does that metaphor work at all in English, or is it because does it make absolutely no sense? Like in German, everything, and actually Ashley speaks German, I think probably a lot better than I do, but everything in German, planets stand in the sky and everything is standing and lying, and it's all about placement in German. And I love that, but it's not the way we talk about the moon and the sun and the stars. So it's a false translation. It's a false way of viewing their language. So I just love little things like that. And it was a way for me to become just more and more entrenched in language. I can't really write poetry every day. It's, but I can translate every day. So it became this thing that I just love to do. Like,
what about you? Why do you ask that question?
Yeah. Carmen, what about you?
Well, I'm asking the question, well, for two reasons. I don't have a literary community and I write poetry. I write in English, in French, and in Spanish. But Spanish,
oh my gosh.
is my tongue. So I was curious because the fact that when I translate my own poetry, and I was just wondering how it enriches one's own poetry when one is reading. For example, one of my favorite poets is Szymborska.
Oh yeah.
I do not read Polish, but the translator into English, actually, she has been at the Vermont Studio Center.
Which translation are you reading?
Well, I have read her, I don't know how many times. I cannot think about
it. There are a number of, one translation is Claire Cavendish.
Yeah, Claire Cavanaugh.
There are a number of translators.
Yeah, but the one that I know and I know very well is Claire's. And and I always said to myself, isn't this incredible? I cannot read Polish, and I can still connect with this poet and be in absolute delight in reading So it's a gift at the same time for people who cannot reach the mother language. So, but anyway, I one of the reasons for me to be here is you have been talking about the literary community, and I have been in Vermont for many years, and I have not found my community. And I have been in touch with the center, and I couldn't apply for anything because I had a cat, and the cat was sick, and the cat died. So I'm now being in touch again. So,
but there are lots of readings and lots of different things. And I'm just over in New Hampshire, so you can hit me up at my Frost Place email.
So we have the information here, right? On the chat, all the information.
I can drop in Maudelle's work email into the chat, but I also dropped in a link to the Bread Loaf Translators Conference. Which
yeah, that was great. I went to that.
Yeah, go ahead, Abby.
No, I was just going to say that's a wonderful conference, but also you can find a lot online, but it's nice to go live.
Yes, it is.
We're looking for. And I just think translation, which you probably found when you were doing your translation, Maudelle, is just a wonderful, and you must find that, Carmen. It's just a great way to be involved in all aspects of writing.
And it changes the way that you think about poems. So you influence your own brain through translation, whether it is real translation, homophonic translation, or even with music. And you're able to internalize the movements, rhetorical, all the different things of these wonderful poets by studying them that deeply. The truth is that I would roll on Lorca like a dog on roadkill. I can't get close enough to that man. I would translate him. I would do anything to get
that's about as close as you can get. Translate.
That's right. That's right. So I didn't, stalking didn't work. None of that worked. But translating, even when other people translate better, Merwin translated him. Yeah. But I still had to have it. I had to do it. I had to have that little piece of Lorca in my heart.
Did you know that Lorca came to Vermont?
Nope.
That's an incredible story. So
okay, well, we'll have to talk about that over lunch.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
Thank you so much for poets, for reading. Thank you for coming. Thank you being here
And thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everybody. So great to see you.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the chat open just for a second. So if you need to grab anything, there's Maudelle's work email. There's a link to the Translators Conference. There's some other few links. But if you have to go, feel free to pop off. But thank you so much for being here. And it's just
hi, guys.
Bye, everybody.
So far away.
Bye.
Havlicek Worley, hit me up.
I will. So
I
good
miss
to
you.
see and hear you. You too.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. It's lovely to see you.
I have a funny translation story real quick.
Oh, tell me.
So I was translating a lot of academic essays from, I was actually having to translate some Germans who were writing in English, and I was having to translate their English into English. And then I was translating some
oh my God.
German into English.
I bow to you.
Translating English into English was much harder than just doing the German into English, even the academic German. But I realized all these years, my husband is a German speaker, and I've been getting so frustrated with him because it took him forever to get to the point. And I finally realized doing all these translations that their order of information is so different.
Different.
It's so different. I mean, it's not just that the primary engine of the sentence is so often the last word with that verb, but it's just the order of information. So the thing that was most important to me in the sentence was not front loaded.
You have a right branching sentence.
The use of the relative clause is not just it's not just a structure, it's the way the mind works.
Yeah.
Trying to put that into English,
Ah.
you completely lose it.
Mm.
You know, you just sit there like, oh, because we don't do this at all, really. I mean, Henry James maybe, but it's very ornate and right.
Oh, it's very specific, and you can go a whole page in one sentence because their definite articles are so specific.
Holy smokes. Do they diagram sentences?
Well, I do to translate. I definitely diagram sentences.
Would that be like an entire wall? I mean, what would that be?
I have to use different colors to block out what belongs with what.
Yeah. I have a little marking I do too, which I go sentence 1 begins here, ends here.
Oh my
We've got
God.
sentence 3, 3.5, 4, 5, 8. So it's fun, but it is a little crazy making.
Dang.
But I really hand it to you, Ashley, because I had to ask somebody. There's 2 pages of philosophy in the book that I translated, and I basically hired a German graduate student to do it for me. I just was like, okay, I just cannot do it. I didn't know you, or I would have called you. Made you do it.
No, I know you. I'll call you.
Oh, I love translating. I think it makes you learn to think differently, at least for a little while.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's 100% true. That's 100% true. That I did a functional MRI because of a brain problem I have. And one of the things that they said is that if you can actually see your brain function differently, whether you've listened to music or you're doing a translation, or you're doing anything else, different parts of your brain light up.
Right. It's
Pretty
also
amazing.
a different, you're using your brain in a different way. I know after a week of translating, I'm the most exhausted person. I mean, just exhausted.
How long do you do it for, Abby? Like all day?
Well, depends on the deadline. So
You have deadlines on this?
sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's way too much for me.
Yeah,
That's way too hard. That's way too hard. I carried around a folded up piece of Lorca for like 2.5 months and barely got out an 8-line poem.
well, poems are a thing unto itself. All right, guys, this was lovely. And Sarah, thank you again.
Buy Abby's book, or you'll be very sorry.
I hope we can read in person sometime.
Me too.
Yeah, until we're together again in person. Be well. Take care.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.